Shocking truth, how a humble mechanic outsmarted a millionaire in 3 insane steps at midnight. It was a night draped in darkness, when whispers of desperation and ambition tangled through the air. As the clock struck 12, a fiery confrontation brewed in the heart of Evergreen Grove. The familiar silhouette of a mechanic's garage flickered like a beacon against the bleak sky, illuminated only by the swaying glow of a single bulb. Inside, Chuck Donovan, a rugged and resourceful mechanic, wiped grease from his hands, completely unaware that his world was about to collide with the unfathomable greed of Victor Steele, the wealthiest man in town. Chuck's life was simple. He worked hard, sweat pouring from his brow, fixing clunkers while dreaming of a better tomorrow. Yet, amid the deafening clank of tools and oil-stained rags, mystical stories slithered through Evergreen Grove. It was said that on certain nights, the garage transformed into a portal, where mere mortals could outsmart the rich and powerful. And tonight was one of those nights. Across town, Victor Steele lounged in his lavish estate, a glass of aged whiskey in hand, his features twisted into a smug grin. But beneath his bravado lay a restlessness, a hunger for dominance that gnawed at his soul. With money like water, he sought to acquire the crown jewel of the mechanic's trade, a vintage muscle car locked within Chuck's garage. He believed it was merely an heirloom, but Chuck sensed something darker, an insatiable greed that thrived under the surface. As Chuck tightened the last bolt on a rusted engine, the air crackled with tension. It was as if the shadows were conspiring, wrapping around him in anticipation of a climactic showdown. The wind howled like a ghost, carrying tales of betrayal and ambition to Chuck's ears. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the garage, making his heart leap into his throat. Had he been heard? Chilled by uncertainty, Chuck stepped outside, only to find Victor standing there, flanked by 2 intimidating bodyguards. The millionaire's voice dripped with condescension. "You know you can't keep that car forever, right?" Each word felt like a dagger. It pierced through the bravado of Chuck's humble existence. But rather than fear, a flicker of defiance ignited within him. Little did Victor realize that Chuck held a card of his own, one that would lead to an unbelievable confrontation that no one could predict. Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash the like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Chuck's heart raced as the wind whispered secrets he couldn't ignore. The challenge ahead felt electrifying. He gripped the wrench tighter, feeling the weight of determination, defined by a simple truth: this wasn't just about a car, it was about pride, perseverance, and the audacity of a mechanic to stand tall against the currents of fate. As the confrontation loomed, curious townsfolk gathered, eyes wide, breaths held. They sensed the tension, whispering amongst themselves. Would Chuck bend to Victor's will? Or would he prove that a humble mechanic could indeed outsmart a millionaire? The atmosphere was charged, ready to explode, and just as Chuck felt the tide of desperation turning in his favor, Victor unleashed a shocking declaration that twisted the entire situation. What would happen next? Was there a path forward for him? The night's air seemed to thicken with anticipation. "Chuck, I'll make you a deal," Victor sneered, stepping closer, his bodyguards hanging back, ready for anything. "You hand over that car tonight, and I'll make you a man of means. You'll never have to grease another engine again." The crowd gasped, their whispers rising like the tension in the air. They weren't just spectators, they were a collective heartbeat thrumming with the night's dark promise. Chuck could feel their eyes boring into him, waiting for his answer, his moment of truth. He swallowed hard. The offer dangled before him like a mirage in a desert, tempting yet treacherous. "Your money won't fix my pride, Victor," Chuck replied, his voice steady, though adrenaline surged through him. "That car means something to me." Another ripple of shock coursed through the onlookers. Chuck's words, heavy with defiance, had struck a chord. Victor's grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of frustration. "Very well then," he hissed, eyes narrowing. "You want to play hardball? Let us raise the stakes." Chuck couldn't shake the feeling that Victor hadn't merely come for the car. It was about domination, about proving that the elite could crush the ordinary. Yet, deep within him simmered a volcanic surge of resolve. He looked away from Victor, scanning the shadows of the crowd, seeking an ally among the whispers and watchful gazes. "You think you can outsmart me, Chuck? You think you're special?" Victor continued, his voice dripping with venom. "You're just a grease monkey living in a dream." Suddenly, a voice emerged from the crowd, a familiar face, his old friend Benny, stepping forward. "It's not about the money, Victor. It's about the heart." The crowd surged, rallying behind Benny's words. Emboldened, Chuck felt a warmth traverse his chest. Hope. His voice rang clearer now, slicing through the hostility. "This isn't just business for me, Victor. It's heritage, a reminder of where I came from. Money can't buy that." Victor, barely able to conceal his rage, straightened up. "Heritage? You're standing in the way of destiny," he spat, venom punctuating his words. "In 12 hours, that car will belong to me." Chuck's mind raced. 12 hours. The clock was ticking, the stakes rising like floodwaters. He darted a glance toward Benny, who nodded, clearly ready to back him up. "What are you planning, Chuck?" Benny whispered, urgency written across his features. "Something desperate," Chuck replied, heart hammering. "It's time to turn the tables. I'm not letting him take this from me." With a flick of the wrist, Chuck grabbed a nearby tarp, tossing it over the vintage muscle car. "Tonight, I'll make you regret underestimating me," he declared, his voice shaking but resolute, each word igniting the tension even further. Victor's eyes gleamed with contempt. "Good luck, mechanic. You'll need it," he sneered before he stepped back, signaling his bodyguards. A storm brewed in Chuck's own garage, where sweat and steel mingled with whispers of a fate yet undetermined. The crowd murmured, a wave of excitement and tension washing over them. They didn't know if it was madness or bravery guiding Chuck, but he felt alive, standing at the precipice of an extraordinary reckoning. As shadows danced in the moonlight, Chuck reached into his pocket, feeling the cold steel of an old ignition key. One idea ignited in his mind, a plan that could either liberate him or lead him directly into Victor's traps. With every heartbeat resounding in his ears, he turned to meet the millionaire's eyes one last time. "You have no idea what I'm capable of," he said, his voice low but fierce, and then Victor's laughter rang through the night, a mocking sound that hung in the air like smoke. "Let's see what happens when the clock runs out, Chuck." But as Chuck felt the world's weight on his shoulders, he assured himself that every moment counted down to something monumental. The mind games were only beginning, and today, beneath the cloak of darkness, he would unveil a shocking twist that would change everything. What was the secret plan brewing inside Chuck's mind? Would he be able to outmaneuver Victor without losing everything? The tension thickened as the countdown to the impossible dawn began. Chuck's heart raced as he took a step back from Victor, the crowd's buzzing energy reflecting his growing anxiety. The stakes had shifted, and he could feel the raw, electric charge in the air. The night held secrets that would either save him or drown him in defeat. Time was against him, but he couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom mixed with fierce resolve. He needed a plan, and fast. Chuck's mind raced, recalling every tip and trick he learned in the garage over the years. The shine of the key in his pocket felt like destiny calling. With an old ignition key in hand, could he find a way to take the battle straight to Victor? "Benny," he muttered, his voice just above a whisper, "I need you to stand guard." Chuck scanned their surroundings, searching for the old tools and resources he could use. His eyes landed on a nearby dumpster overflowing with odds and ends, scraps of metal, old tires. They could be used for a distraction. Benny, sensing the gravity of the moment, nodded swiftly. "What's the play, man? You need backup?" Chuck's jaw clenched, determination shining through. "Not yet. Just keep your eyes peeled." He couldn't afford a misstep. He had to outthink Victor without exposing his intentions too soon. With the tarp still draped over the beloved vintage muscle car, Chuck ducked behind it, letting shadows envelop him. He pulled the ignition key from his pocket again, fingers trembling slightly. Memories flooded back, the laughter with his father, the smell of oil and gasoline in the garage. This was more than just a car, it represented everything he'd fought for. In the periphery, Victor's bodyguards moved like hawks, predatory, alert. Chuck stayed low, plotting his next move. He felt the weight of the crowd as their hushed murmurs built like a rising tide behind him. They wanted to see a show, suspense crackling in the night air. Little did they know that the real show was about to unfold. Chuck's fingers grazed the cool metal scraps, and an idea hit him like a bolt of lightning. He hastened to gather discarded car parts, using whatever he could find to rig a simple yet effective smoke bomb. Powdered chemicals from the old tires mixed with other debris could create enough distraction to slip past Victor's guards. "Come on, just a little more time," he muttered under his breath, desperation creeping in. He focused, the adrenaline sharpening his senses. Finally, with the system set in motion, Chuck backed away, leaving the improvised device hidden behind the dumpster. If all went according to plan, Victor's arrogance would be his undoing. It was risky, sure, but it was all Chuck had. As the clock ticked louder in his mind, Chuck stole a glance back at Victor. The man stood, still smug, barking orders that echoed against the garage walls. The millionaire couldn't see the storm brewing beneath his nose. The plan was set. In moments, a distraction would erupt. Chuck's breath quickened. He needed to act without hesitation. He could cause a scene, set Victor on edge. This was just the first strike in a larger game, a game that had no room for fear. "Let us do this," Chuck whispered to himself one last time, summoning the courage deep within. As he stepped out from behind the tarp, the air shifted, and he knew he was teetering on the edge of a precipice. And then it happened, the moment he'd been waiting for, the first crack of chaos as the smoke began to billow high, filling the air with a dense, thick haze. Victor's laughter became a frantic shout, nearly swallowed by the sudden panic of the crowd. But as Chuck advanced, his resolve steeled, he realized one thing: this battle was just beginning, and Victor's underestimation might just be his biggest blunder. What awaited him in the smoke? Would Chuck emerge victorious, or would he fall victim to the chaos he unleashed? The air hung heavy with uncertainty, the pull of fate drawing nearer. The smoke thickened, wrapping around Chuck like an ominous shroud. Panic erupted within the crowd, screams punctuating the air as people stumbled and coughed from the acrid haze. Chuck's heart thundered in his chest, his instincts kicking in. He had to move fast. Victor's bodyguards, thrown off guard, stumbled back, eyes watering. Chuck seized the moment, darting through the chaos, his mind a whirlpool of focus. The hard metal of his key dug into his palm, reminding him of the prize waiting just beyond Victor's grasp. "Hey! Get that kid!" Victor bellowed, voice slicing through the smoke as he regained his composure. The guards, now regrouping, cut through the crowd with purpose, their predatory instincts kicking back in. Chuck spied them out of the corner of his eye. Panic threatened to bubble over, but he fought it back. "Benny!" Chuck had to find him. Yet the smoke pulled like a thick fog, distorting vision and senses. Desperation clawed at his thoughts, pushing him forward. He rounded a corner, eyes scanning the swirling chaos for his friend. "There!" Benny's voice boomed like a lighthouse beacon through the storm. Chuck spotted him positioned near the muscle car, his face set with a fierce determination. "Get in!" Benny yelled, but before Chuck could respond, someone brushed past him, a hulking figure shoving through the confused crowd. It was one of Victor's guards, and he locked eyes with Chuck, brows narrowing fiercely. Chuck's pulse quickened. This isn't good. He pivoted sharply, knowing he couldn't outrun the massive form lunging toward him. He was cornered, his only option to fight his way past. But then the smoke began to dissipate, and as visibility returned, he noticed something that made his heart race for an entirely different reason. The vintage muscle car sat glinting under the overhead lights, a beacon of hope. Its engine, his father's pride and joy, held the key to everything. With a wild shout, Chuck sprinted toward the car, adrenaline pumping. He reached the driver's side just as Benny barreled into the guard, the two of them crashing to the ground in a tangle of limbs. "Unlock it! Now!" Chuck ordered, tossing the key to Benny, who scrambled to grab it from the floor and fumbled to fit it into the ignition. Victor's anger snapped in the air, crackling like electricity. "Stop them! Don't let them escape!" As Chuck leaned into the car, he would never forget the scent of leather and gasoline, pure freedom. The engine roared to life, and Benny lunged into the passenger seat, his face flushed with determination. "Let us go!" But before Chuck could slam the gear into reverse, the silhouette of Victor loomed ominously at the edge of the garage, flanked by two more guards. Their faces were masks of menace, framed against the backdrop of chaos. Victor's eyes glinted with fury, and he raised a hand, signaling the guards. Just then, a metallic crash rang out behind them, a distraction from the commotion above, where a chandelier hung precariously. The sound echoed, mingling with the gasps of the crowd. Chuck's grip tightened on the wheel. Now or never, he shouted, pressing the accelerator hard. The tires screeched, pushing the car forward. Benny held on tight as the car surged ahead, but it wasn't enough. Chuck had to make a choice: risk it all or turn back. Lights flashed around him as the reality of their gamble grew thicker. The chase had begun, but all Chuck could think about was the blood pumping in his veins, the weight of the night, and the showdown looming in the shadows. Will they evade Victor's grasp, or will their audacity be their downfall? The night was just getting started, and danger was lurking behind each turn. The roar of the engine filled Chuck's ears, drowning out the chaos around them. He slammed the gear into reverse, eyes fixed on Victor and his guards closing in. The world narrowed to that moment, every second stretching like a rubber band ready to snap. "Hold on!" he shouted, the adrenaline coursing through him like wildfire. Benny braced himself, his fingers gripping the dashboard. "Go! Go!" he shouted, urgency tinged with desperation. Chuck punched the accelerator again, sending the car flying backward with screeching tires, the rear window framing the furious face of Victor as the distance between them widened. A crash erupted behind them. Another piece of the chandelier must have fallen. Dust and debris filled the air, scattering like stars caught in a cosmic explosion. Chuck hardly registered it. All that mattered was the road ahead. He cranked the wheel to the right, barely missing a cluster of panicked people still disoriented by the smoke, but then Chuck felt the weight of that choice hanging above him. Did he really want to get into an all-out war with Victor? A guy who had more power and resources than he could fathom? Yet, as he looked at Benny, who was staring back with fierce determination, the resolve grew. They had come too far to turn back now. "Tighten your seatbelt," Chuck yelled, veering sharply onto the street. The tires squealed against the asphalt, and for a fraction of a moment, the car glanced against a lamppost, sending a jolt of pain shooting through Chuck's side. This was beyond reckless, but it was also exhilarating. "Left! Left!" Benny called out, eyes darting. Victor's guards fanned out behind them, desperately attempting to outmaneuver them down the winding streets. Chuck followed the instruction, weaving through the darkened alleyways, the headlights bouncing off grimy bricks and tarnished storefronts. "We can't outrun them forever," Benny gasped, peering into the rearview mirror as shadows grew closer. "What's the plan?" "I'm thinking we need something they won't expect." Chuck's mind raced. "If we can lose them in the industrial area, there are old warehouses. We might find a hiding place." Okay, Benny urged, looking behind. "But we got to hurry." As they rounded another turn, the car's engine sputtered momentarily, clutching at his gut. "Stay strong, baby," Chuck whispered, as if willing the age-old machine to carry them just a little further, but just as Benny was about to voice another direction, everything seemed to slow down. The lights of an oncoming vehicle flashed like a beacon, illuminating a sprawling yard piled with rusty scrap metal. "There!" Benny pointed. "Over there!" Chuck's heart raced with hope. They might have found the perfect place to duck and hide. He swung into the makeshift parking lot, dodging the jagged edges of steel and debris. The car jolted to a stop behind a stack of old car frames, the engine finally exhaling a quiet sigh. Silence enveloped them, shattered only by the distant sounds of Victor's guards searching for them. Chuck could hear their voices, fuming and desperate. He turned to Benny, who was still wearing that fierce expression. "What happens now?" he asked, breathless. "I don't know. We wait, maybe they'll move on." But deep down, both boys knew this wouldn't be over so easily. Chuck felt the weight of the key in his pocket, the symbol of everything he was fighting for. He had hoped this chase would give him the chance to reclaim his father's legacy. But what if Victor was just getting started? What if they find us? Benny asked, eyes wide with unease. "I won't let that happen," Chuck replied, determination settling in his bones. They would have to outthink Victor. This game of cat and mouse was far from over. The stakes had never been higher, and yet the thrill pulled at Chuck's heart. Would their daring escape lead to freedom or to an even darker confrontation with Victor? One way or another, the truth was creeping close. And as darkness shrouded them, the real test was about to begin. The air was thick with tension as they waited, hearts pounding in synchrony with the muted thumps of their nerves. Each heavy breath felt laden with consequence, the weight of Victor's threat lingering like the shadows creeping around them. "Do you think they even know we're here?" Benny whispered, breaking the taut silence. A bead of sweat slid down Chuck's temple. Fear clawed at him, but it was the uncertainty that gnawed the hardest. "I don't know, I just want to make it out of here," he muttered. He glanced around, taking in the fortress of rust and decay that surrounded them. The harsh beam of warehouse lights flickered weakly above, casting ghostly shapes over the hulk of a long-abandoned truck nearby. Moments ticked by, seconds stretching into eternity. Beyond their makeshift refuge, Victor's men scoured the area. Chuck could hear their voices, barking orders, the fear and frustration thick in their tones. It made his skin crawl. They were close, too close. He risked peeking out from their cover, shadows flickering like whispers amid the light. "Stay down," Benny hissed, gripping Chuck's arm just as he moved. The sudden sharpness in his friend's voice sent a chill through him. They weren't just hiding, they were prey now, and the hunters were relentless. The engine of the car was silent, but Chuck could hear the distant rumble of vehicles approaching, others joining the search. Was it possible Victor had called in reinforcements? Panic swirled inside him. They had to come up with a new plan, fast. "What if we circle around?" Chuck suggested, his mind racing with escape routes. "There's gotta be a back entrance to the warehouse." "But what if they see us?" Benny shot back, eyes wide, fear tinging his voice. Chuck considered this. "We can't just sit here. If they find us now, we're done. We need to fight our way through." "Fight?" Benny echoed. "We're not soldiers. We're just two kids trying to survive." "I know," Chuck snapped, heart pounding louder than ever. "But we can't let fear paralyze us." The idea surged through him like a current. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the key, heavy and cold in his palm. Benny's eyes widened as he understood the weight of what Chuck was holding. "Do you think it really opens something? Something important?" "It has to," Chuck replied, his voice steadying. "If it belonged to my dad, it means he had a plan for me, for us. We have to find out what it unlocks." Just then, a low rumble of voices drew nearer, a group of Victor's guards, just around the corner. Chuck glanced at Benny, urgency written all over his face. Now or never. They slid out from behind the scrap metal, heart racing, their senses on high alert. Chuck led the way, pressing through the darkness, his breathing steady even as the world narrowed. Shadows stretched before them, alive and flickering with every shaky step. "Which way?" Benny whispered. "Back there," Chuck pointed toward a dim passageway tucked behind what looked like a makeshift mountain of discarded tires. The guards were still hunting, scrambling through the wreckage, their voices slicing through the heavy air. Every muscle in Chuck's body screamed at him to hurry. As they crouched low and moved toward the opening, a clank echoed behind them. Chuck's heart dropped. Had one of the guards seen them? The sound surged closer, a metallic scraping that shattered the tension of the night. "Go!" Chuck barked, pushing Benny forward just as a flashlight beam slashed through the dark. They slipped into the passage, the weight of the key a burning reminder of everything that was at stake. But even as they darted forward, a growing sense of dread settled in Chuck's gut. What if Victor was one step ahead of them? What if they were running straight into a trap? The darkness seemed to pulse around him, and in that moment, he understood the stark reality: escape was just the beginning. They were diving deeper into a game with stakes that could cost them everything, and at the heart of it all, a terrifying revelation awaited. Would the key unlock their salvation, or would it lead them into Victor's hands? The shadow seemed to await the answer, a truth lurking, waiting to shatter the fragile hope that clung to them. The night was far from over. Inside the passageway, the air was dank, thick with the smell of mold and rust. Chuck and Benny moved quickly but quietly, hearts hammering in their chests like wild drums. The flashlight beam danced anxiously around them, creating ghostly shadows that flickered along the rugged walls. "What if they find us?" Benny whispered, casting a wary glance over his shoulder. Chuck shook his head, gripping the key tightly. The chill of the metal seemed to seep into his skin, reminding him of the stakes. "They won T. We just have to stay quiet and keep moving." They navigated through the constricted space, the clutter of forgotten equipment brushing against their shoulders. Each creak of metal and rustle of debris made their skin crawl. Time felt like a heavy weight pressing down on them, urging them to move faster. Suddenly, an echo rang out from behind louder than before. "Check over there," a guard shouted, footsteps crunching on gravel. Panic surged through Chuck as he exchanged a quick glance with Benny. Their eyes spoke volumes of fear and resoluteness. "Simon, we need to keep going," Chuck urged. They pressed forward, the key a steady reminder of purpose. They rounded a corner, and the passage opened up into a larger chamber. Old wooden crates cluttered the floor, and faded maps adorned the walls. A rusty old lock hung from the door across the chamber, the metal glinting in the dim light. Chuck's heart skipped a beat. "There!" He pointed. "That door could be it." Benny's breathing was rapid and shallow. "But what if it's locked? What if it leads us straight back to them? We'll never know if we don't try." Chuck replied, determination surging through him. He stepped closer, the key feeling molten hot in his palm. Every twist of the lock felt like a countdown to salvation or doom. Just as he was about to insert the key, a sudden crash echoed from their left. They spun around to see the guards charging into the chamber, frantic after having lost their trail. They were here. "Find them!" One of them bellowed, their voices slicing through the tension like a knife. "Now or never!" Chuck hissed, jamming the key into the lock. His hands shook, and he cursed his nerves. With a deep breath, he turned the key. The lock clicked a soft, almost mocking sound, but before he could exhale, the door creaked open to reveal a darkened interior. "Quick!" Chuck urged, yanking Benny inside just as the guards stormed closer. He slammed the door behind them, pressing his back against it, breathless. The room was pitch black. Benny shivered beside him. "What if this is a dead end?" His voice trembled. "I don't know, but we have to look around." Chuck moved cautiously through the dark, reaching out to feel the walls. Dust settled like a blanket around them, and with every step, the weight of danger loomed heavier. He could almost hear Victor's laughter in the distance, a taunt echoing in his mind. A small window caught his attention, its glass clouded and dirty. He crawled toward it, but the moment he peered outside, a shadow flitted past, a figure moving beneath the harsh lights of the warehouse. "It's them!" He breathed, heart racing again. They just passed by. Benny joined him at the window, both of them holding their breaths as the guards searched the area outside. "We're trapped, Chuck. They're everywhere." "Not yet, not if we can get further in," he said with an intensity that made his friend's eyes widen. "We need to keep moving. There has to be a way out." As Chuck turned, he noticed a glint of something metallic on a nearby shelf. Curiosity sparked in him. He approached, heart thumping with renewed hope, only to be met with a chilling surprise: a second key lying next to an old photograph in a dusty frame, the image worn but still recognizable. "You've got to see this!" he gasped, grabbing it, their urgency magnified. But just as he turned back to Benny, panic gripped him. The sound of heavy footsteps approached. Victor's South men were close. The door rattled, a voice barking orders from outside. "We know you're in there. Come out now." Chuck's heart raced. Clutching the two keys tightly, he knew they had only seconds. "We can't let them catch us. We need to find the truth or die trying." "Wait, what do we do now?" Benny asked, eyes wide with dread as the guards pressed harder against the door. Chuck faced him, determination mixing with fear. "We're getting out, but we have to be smart. This isn't just about running anymore. We're playing for our lives. As the door shuddered, preparing to give way, Chuck felt a flicker of hope amidst the chaos, a desperate notion that the truth could be their salvation. What awaited them beyond the door? Would they have the guts to seize their fate, or would Victor's iron grip snuff it out? The answers loomed closer, tangled in the shadows of their reality. The door cracked open, just a hair, but enough for Chuck to hear the sharp breaths of the guards outside. He could feel Benny's panic radiating off him, a chaotic energy that was almost palpable. We have to choose now, Chuck whispered fiercely, eyes darting between the door and the mysterious keys in his hands. Go where? Benny replied, his voice barely above a whisper, yet tinged with despair. The guards were yelling, shoving against the door, and the hinges creaked in protest, threatening to give way at any moment. In that instant, Chuck's eyes landed on the dusty photograph near the second key. It looked old, sepia-toned, the faces shrouded in time but hinting at stories long buried. He plucked it up and examined it under the faintest glow of his flashlight. Hold this, he instructed, shoving the photo into Benny's hands. He could see Benny's confusion but didn't have time to explain. The second key could be the answer, but its significance was tied to whatever history was captured in the faded image. He steeled himself, twisting the second key in the lock on the other side of the room. His heart raced, a surge of adrenaline mixed with dread. Would it open an escape route or lead them directly into Victor's clutches? The guards pounded on their door harder now. Stop! We know you're in there. Voices blared from the other side. Chuck winced, the sound reverberating in his skull, drowning out the rational thoughts. They had been so close before, too close to give up now. With a shaky breath, he turned the key. It fit with a satisfying click, but to Chuck's horror, the door remained shut, a cruel mockery of his hopes. Worry crept back into his bones as Benny's hand squeezed his shoulder. Let us find another way. Benny's urgency added to the tension, spurring Chuck into action. With the first key still in his palm, he darted toward another wall, searching for a hidden latch or an old mechanism that might lead them out. Chuck's fingers danced over the uneven surface, brushing along cracks and crevices. His heart sank when he heard the door behind them crack louder as the guards threatened to break it down. He could taste the bitterness of failure, but somewhere deep, a flicker of hope ignited, urging him not to relent. There! He shouted as he spotted an iron grate high above, just inches below the ceiling. With no time to waste, he jumped, planting his feet against the wall, using the shelves for leverage. His palms scraped against coarse surfaces, but he didn't care, escape was within reach. Chuck, what are you doing? Benny gasped, glancing back at the door. We can't leave that way. Trust me. Chuck yelled back, adrenaline pushing him higher. He felt the grip of panic melding with an exhilarating rush as he pulled himself up, his fingers curling around the iron grate. But the moment his weight shifted, the lock on the door gave way, swinging open to reveal a storm of uniforms and flashlights. Shouts echoed, and he could barely see as Benny's terrified expression filled his vision. Hurry! Benny yelled, urgency twisting his voice into something sharp. With a wrenching effort, Chuck yanked open the grate, debris crumbling beneath him, and squeezed through the tight opening. He landed unceremoniously on the floor of another room, breathing hard. It felt like freedom, but his pulse raced with the knowledge that Benny was still inside. Benny, come on! Chuck hissed, peering back through the grate but spotting only darkness. The guard's voices grew stronger, and he felt a tightening in his chest. Benny's fate hinged on their connection. He wouldn't leave without him. Moments later, he saw a flicker of movement. Benny lunged through the opening, his body collapsing beside Chuck as he scrambled to pull the grate shut. The sounds of chaos grew louder behind them, threats filling the air, but their breath came in sharp quakes, alive with the fire of survival. As they huddled together, a shadow shifted by the door they had just escaped. Did they go this way? A guard asked, peering into the dim light of the room. Chuck pressed his index finger to his lips, urgency flaring as he scanned the area around them. In front of them lay another exit, a sliver of light shining beneath a heavy door. Should we go? Benny whispered, fear palpable but tinged with a dying hope, both knowing what stepping through meant. Chuck nodded, glancing back at the door, hearing the guards approaching. But before they could bolt for the exit, a voice rang out from behind them, sending a cold shiver down Chuck's spine. "Don't you dare think you can slip away from me." The unmistakable, dangerously calm voice of Victor echoed in the hallway. What would they face at the door of uncertain escape? Would this next choice seal their fate or offer a new chance at life? The answers were just beyond reach, lost within the shadows creeping ever closer. "Go!" Chuck commanded, lunging toward the faint sliver of light beneath the heavy door. He could hear Victor's voice growing closer, filled with the confidence of someone who had everything to lose, and he couldn't let that confidence devour them both. Benny hesitated, casting one last terrified glance over his shoulder. "What if we run right into him?" "Then we fight," Chuck answered, steeling himself. Every instinct told him to run, to flee like they were kids again sprinting down empty streets without a care in the world. But this was no game. Every second stretched thin, taut with dread and the pounding rhythm of their hearts. With one swift motion, Chuck pushed the door open just enough for them to slip through, descending into the unknown on the other side. A chill tumbled down his spine. The hallway ahead was dark and narrow, shadows swallowed the faint light, but their urgency drove them forward. Benny followed close behind, his fingers brushing against the cool metal of the doorframe for support. They moved quietly, every sound amplified in the tense silence, the soft tread of their shoes on concrete, their breaths echoing like whispers of despair. "Where are we?" Benny asked, squinting as they ventured deeper into the abyss. Chuck placed a hand on Benny's shoulder, squeezing it as a shaky promise. "Not sure, but we have to keep moving, keep your eyes peeled." Suddenly, the dim hallway burst to life with movement. Shadows darted outside the reach of their flashlight, a flicker here and there, sending alarms blaring in Chuck's mind. With each step, he felt shadows pulling at the edges of his vision, as if ghosts were whispering secrets of all the things he was about to lose. Then came the sound they dreaded, the distant clatter of boots. The guards were coming, their rough voices like thunder rolling closer. They went this way. Search every crevice. Chuck's heart slammed against his chest. They couldn't be caught again, not when they were so close to escaping. This way, he yelled, grabbing Benny's hand and darting toward a door at the end of the hallway, barely visible in the gloom. With no time to spare, Chuck slammed against the door and flung it open, pushing Benny through before following suit. Their eyes adjusted to a stark, blinding light, a basement of sorts, littered with old crates, exhaust pipes draped like spider webs, and an overpowering sense of decay. "What now?" Benny panted, scanning the empty, cold space with wide eyes. Chuck didn't reply. Instead, he grabbed his flashlight and turned in circles, searching for a way out. The room seemed to pulse with hidden dangers and secrets. The weight of desperation hung thick in the air. "Find something we can use," he urged, rifling through the crates. If Victor caught up to them, it would be a maddening end. "Chuck, over here." Benny's voice broke through the fog of Chuck's racing thoughts, excitement trembling beneath the fear. Chuck rushed over, and there it was, an old, rusted ladder leading up to a great high above. It looked precarious, but it was a path nonetheless. "Do you think it'll hold?" Benny said, swallowing hard, dread settling heavy in his stomach. "Only one way to find out," Chuck replied, determination igniting within him. "I'll go first." Just as he began to climb, another crash echoed from the hallway. They had come from a series of heavy footsteps and angry shouting. Then a new voice pierced through the chaos. "I want them alive. If you catch them, do not engage unless I say so." A chill shot through Chuck at the sound of Victor's orders. He scrambled higher, heart racing. "Come on, Benny. We don't have time." Benny followed, their bodies pressed tightly together as they ascended the rickety ladder. Chuck's hands shook, both from the fear of slipping and the dread of capture. As they neared the top, he could see it, a glimmer of daylight filtering through the grating. Just as Chuck reached for the last rung, a sudden crash filled the air, and the door ripped open beneath them. Chuck's heart sank. They were out of time. "Victor!" Benny whispered in horror, voice trembling as they both hung suspended between the wrong choices. "Do we climb?" Chuck asked, breathless, the fear of heights suddenly paralyzing him. But before Benny could answer, a shadow loomed over them from the entrance. Victor had arrived. Well, if it isn't my two little mice." Time to catch you. A new urgency surged through Chuck. They had one chance left. With all his strength, he called to Benny, "Jump." What would happen next? Would they plummet into danger or ascend into the light of freedom? With a leap of faith, Chuck and Benny hurled themselves upward, arms swinging wildly as they grasped the edge of the grate. The sunlight poured through like a fiery promise while the shadows of Victor and his guards loomed ominously behind them. "Grab my hand!" Chuck shouted, his voice cracking with urgency. Benny, adrenaline coursing through him, lunged, fingers brushing against Chuck's outstretched hand. In an electrifying moment, they caught each other, pulling with all their might. Together, they scrambled up onto the roof, collapsing against the dusty surface as a cacophony of voices filled the air below, their hearts hammered as they lay there, the pulse of freedom ringing in their ears. Benny gasped for breath. Did we make it?" Chuck turned, fighting back the swell of exhilaration. "Not yet. We need to find another way off this roof." The grace of the moment faded, edged by their reality. They were still hunted, Victor's shadow lingering like a storm cloud. As they inched along the rooftop, Chuck spotted a rusty fire escape ladder leading down to an alleyway. "Over there." He pointed. Benny nodded, determination solidifying in his eyes. Dodging obstacles and old ventilation units, they hurried to the side. But their desperate chase was far from over. "Stop them!" Victor's voice cut through the air, fierce and frantic. "Don't let them escape." The adrenaline shot through them again, and they moved faster, fueled by sheer survival instinct. The moment they reached the ladder, they heard footsteps echoing against the rooftop. "We need to go now." Chuck pressed his hands against Benny's back, urging him down first. They stumbled down the rungs, each clank of metal ringing like a death knell. They finally reached the ground, panting heavily. Chuck whipped around to see Victor's guards emerging onto the roof above, their anxious forms moving quickly. "This way!" Chuck cried, grabbing Benny's arm, and they darted into the alley, faces filled with desperation. The narrow passage twisted around like a labyrinth, their footsteps echoing as they rounded corners, dodging piles of discarded trash and flickering streetlights. Chill air wrapped around them as the night deepened, doubling down on their urgency. "Chuck, what if they catch us?" Benny's voice was strained with fear, a heavy weight dragging at his spirit. "They won T," Chuck replied, though doubt poked at him like needles. "We just need to outsmart them." They stumbled out onto a desolate street, each harsh breath heavy with adrenaline. Thunder rumbled in the distance, but they didn't pause. A plan started to form in Chuck's mind. He turned to Benny, his resolve sharpening. "We're going to confront Victor. We can't keep running. We need to show him that he can't take this from us." "What do you mean? Are you crazy?" Benny's voice came out in a rush. No. Hear me out." Chuck interrupted, intensity lining his features. "Victor thinks he can control everything. But we have something he doesn't. A legacy, something from my dad that connects us to this fight. We'll turn his arrogance against him. We'll take the fight to him." Benny hesitated but could see the fire in Chuck's eyes. "All right, but we have to be smart. We need a plan." They steeled themselves and made their way toward Victor's estate, the looming structure glinting ominously against the night sky. It was time to unlock the truth behind that second key, together. When they arrived, they snuck around to the back entrance, where the shadows held secrets and whispers of freedom danced. Chuck's heart raced with memories, his father's words echoing in his ears like a mantra of pride and resilience. "Keys don't just open doors, they unlock potential." Taking a deep breath, he inserted the second key into the lock of a side door he found ajar. As it clicked, chucking it open revealed a room filled with trophies and photographs, forgotten moments of triumph, remnants of wealth, and dominance that had drowned out the humble beginnings they represented. In that moment, under the stark lights, Chuck understood. "This isn't just about the car, this is about reclaiming my father's legacy. It's about showing Victor the value of heart over greed." Benny nodded, the fear melting away as the shared determination took root. "Let us do this." With one last glance at each other, intensity igniting unwavering spirits, they stepped into the storm, the reality of the moment igniting their resolve. The confrontation wasn't just a clash of wills, It was a battle for truth, purpose, and the heritage that shaped them both. As dawn's first light crept through the horizon, casting hope across their weary faces, they were ready to unleash everything they had against Victor Steele. So what happens next? You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the thrilling follow-ups. Smash that like button right now to feed the algorithm. And flood the comments section with your wild theories about what these two will do next. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with 5 friends who need to witness the power of hope and resilience. Your support makes all the difference.